You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to the website for free. Use the promo code Miami30 and also subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. It is our Scouting the Opponent episode, and Miami will travel to play Cal this week. It's been a very long time since Miami has played the Cal Bears. Almost 30 years ago when the Hurricanes traveled all the way to Berkeley. And today I've got Matt Moreno joining me from the Cal Rivals site to talk a little bit about the game and to preview the Cal Bears. Thank you for joining me today, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So first off, man, I just kind of want to talk about game day coming to Berkeley, just what the feel is around the program. And Cal very similar to Miami, gets a lot of flack about their crowd and how many fans will actually show up to games or whatnot. It's definitely something that we've both seen and heard over the years. So what's the feel around the program? Of course, with game day coming and just the feel around campus or around the team. And what kind of crowd do you expect Saturday night?
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. I think it's going to be a very interesting kind of test case to see, all right, are fans fully bought in? Are they into this thing? Because it's an interesting place in terms of, and for many reasons, Berkeley, but when it comes to sports, there is a very passionate fan base, but it's, there's a lot of alums that are spread out across the country. And so I think it's been interesting to see the kind of algorithm thing kind of come into play where there's social media. There's a ton of burner accounts that have really pushed, Cal and kind of brought it to the forefront. I know earlier in the season, there's a lot of conversations going on around the burners. It's something that kind of started a couple years ago. And the program, their recruiting staff has really got into it and supporting the burners, and the players, even this week are mentioning, hey, the burners are doing their thing. And so a lot of kind of unknown fans that have started Twitter accounts that have really pushed, Cal football, but it hasn't always translated to people in the seats. And so, my first experience, I covered a Cal game, and in the parking structure, there's a media and fan kind of parking area. And someone from the area from Berkeley was like, they just couldn't understand why they couldn't park in their usual parking spot. And I parked there every single day. What's going on? And they're like, there's a football game going on. And she couldn't have cared any less. I mean, about the fact that there was a football game going on that day. And so it's kind of an interesting place in terms of the fan support. They will fill up the stadium for the big game when they play Stanford. That's always meaningful, the rivalry game. But last year against Auburn, which you can kind of see in my background here, this is from that game, was really the biggest crowd I think they had in a while. And so there are some spots in there.
Orange and blue in that crowd. A lot of orange and blue.
So that's so that's kind of the issue is like, well, let's kind of see what happens. And so I think there is a ton of excitement about game day being out there. I think that's not going to be an issue. I think they're going to get people to go out there early. And even Justin Wilcox this week kind of hinted like, hey, we're going to try and bring some food for people that, are out there early to entice them. Their last home game against San Diego State, he was really avid about getting into the community. He was, along Frat Row. He was at restaurants like, hey, come out and watch us play. So they're really trying to get this thing going. And so it'll be very interesting to see how it all plays out. If there are, if it is a sellout, I know he said there's not a ton of tickets left. And so it's a very inviting place. I think, a lot of the Auburn fans were, I think, a little bit surprised about how welcome they were, at Cal Memorial Stadium. And as you can see again in this photo, there's a ton of them that were out there. And so if Miami brings their fans, I think they'll be very welcome there. And it's a great venue. If you look off from one side, you can see the entire Bay Area behind the stadium. And so it's just a really great view, really great setting for a football game. And, it's a fun place, and the students will be out in full force. I think that's really where they're trying to get as many people as they can. I know a lot of, I mentioned those burners, a lot of those kind of alums have bought up a lot of tickets and are trying to, get them to students a little bit cheaper, get them maybe even free into games. And there's a lot of kind of initiatives that are kind of at the grassroots level. A lot of fans and alums have taken it upon themselves to get, advertising on BART on the subway system and the train system. And they're having a special like, hey, we're going to get you out to game day early. And so it has been really cool to see, how the greater Bay Area has really kind of come to support Cal this week. They know how significant it is. Who knows if this is going to happen another time? This is the first time they've ever had College Game Day in town. And so it has been cool to see. I'm still have my reservations of whether or not it's going to relate to fans in the seats at 7:30 p.m. local, 10:30 for people, in Miami,
Yeah.
to come out and watch the game and watch and see the festivities, or if they kind of burn out after, getting up early for College Game Day. So we'll see.
Yeah, that was my first thought as well. I'm just like, okay, game day starts at 9 o'clock Eastern time, so that means it's starting at 6 a.m. and then you have a game time over there for you guys, 7:30 p.m. That's a long day, for those fans to really kind of stay juiced up. So it is going to be interesting to kind of see about the environment. Cam Ward is on record saying that Pac-12 football is the best football, and that the crowds in Pac-12 football are, even better than SEC crowds after the game against Florida. Not sure if he was referring to Cal in that respect, but we'll see. I think at with game day, that's definitely an added boost. I was certainly surprised that California indeed got the game day opportunity to host. So will be interesting to see what that game day feel will be like. So let's talk a little bit about the game, or the teams rather. Now, Cal, I think, kind of made headlines first by beating Auburn on the road. Very impressive win. To win anywhere in the SEC, especially if you're a West Coast team, long travel is very impressive. And most recently, they did lose to Florida State. Florida State not as impressive um, as maybe other teams in the conference, and Florida State was able to pretty much kind of shut down the offense of Cal and win a very close, low scoring game. So, in your opinion, Matt, just what happened, what went right for the Bears against Auburn, and what went wrong against the Seminoles?
Yeah, a lot of this depends on, and a lot of their success depends on how well the offense plays. And so they have not played at full strength. They have not played really very well at any point in the season. Even in the Auburn game, there were a lot of plays where it just didn't look like how they want it to look. And that's kind of been the story of the Justin Wilcox era. He's a defensive minded coach. Their defense has turned out a lot of pros. They have been a very good defense over the years. This year, again, continue to be one of the top teams in terms of takeaways and interceptions. And so their secondary has always kind of been their hallmark. That's what they're known for. And so you expect every week the defense is going to lead things, and that's where their strength is going to be. Finding the right recipe on offense has been a struggle under Justin Wilcox. They're on their third offensive coordinator in 3 years. It just hasn't looked good offensively. And so I think what went right in that Auburn game was that their defense played unbelievable, and they did enough. They did just enough offensively to get in the end zone and make plays offensively to stay ahead. And so I think it was kind of a similar story against Florida State, where defense was playing well. Florida State just had enough of an opportunity. You can't expect the defense to play perfect, and that's kind of what Cal has been this season. Is if the defense plays perfect and it comes up with takeaways, Cal's gonna be in a position to win games. But they need the offense to do something, and the offense just couldn't do anything against Florida State. And it's very interesting because throughout training camp, even kind of in the spring, but especially during training camp, that was an issue. There was long stretches during training camp. They have completely open practices. I was able to watch every single rep, every single practice, and there were moments where they just could not get the ball in the end zone. They had no issue moving the ball up and down the field, which you saw against Florida State. They outgained Florida State.
Yeah.
Moving the ball up and down the field is not the problem. It's getting in the end zone. They get into the red zone and something changes. They go through these spells where they just cannot get the ball in the end zone. And so I think that's what you saw happen against Florida State. They had to rely on their field goal kicker. He attempted 5 field goals, missed 2 of them. If they make both of those, they win the game. But also, you shouldn't be relying on 5 field goals from your field goal kicker. And so that's kind of been the biggest issue. They've talked a lot about pre-snap penalties. Obviously, you don't expect that to happen as much in a home game. So I think that was definitely an issue against Florida State, where crowd noise and some of those types of things and just being in a different kind of environment really played into that. They had the same kind of issue against Auburn. So won't expect that as much this week, but it has been a problem. It has been a problem in kind of every single game this year. And so getting false starts and getting some different pre-snap penalties that have really impacted them. And so it felt like the Florida State game was kind of a mashup of everything that has gone wrong at different points during the offseason, or at least things that you kind of like earmarked as like, oh, this could potentially be an issue down the line. Felt like that all kind of came to a head in that Florida State game. And in Auburn, they were able to kind of avoid all of those things. And so maybe only had some of them able to win that game in a close matchup. And so a lot of what Cal does and where their success is going to come from is going to be defense continuing to play very well, but you just need something from the offense. And if they're able to get something going offensively, they're in a good position to win games.
Awesome. Let's talk about that offense and just really schematically what Cal does. I think fans kind of want to know what they're in for. I mean, the past couple of weeks they've dealt with dual threat quarterbacks. I mean, that was kind of the main issue for the Miami Hurricanes on defense, and they also faced a big bruising running back last week in Basil Tootin. So give us a sense of kind of what Cal does on the offensive side of the ball.
Well, it's interesting because I can tell you what they want to do. We haven't seen exactly what they can do at any point this season. They've been really banged up. Offensive line wise, Jaden Ott is their star running back, one of the top running backs in the country. Really has not played healthy at any point this season, maybe outside of the first game. He had two rushing touchdowns in their season opener, got hurt in that game, and just hasn't been the same since. And they've tried to get him back on the field a couple of times, hasn't looked 100%. So he hasn't been the Jaden Ott that we all expected. And when you have a player like that, the whole idea is like, hey, you get him the ball as much as possible. They just haven't been able to do that. So they haven't been able to play at a full kind of full strength, really. And so their whole idea, and Mike Blash, who is their offensive line coach, who was their offensive line coach last year, has now taken over as offensive coordinator. When he stepped in, his whole goal was, we are going to run the ball as much as possible. We know we have a very deep running back group. We know it's led by a star player, somebody who's capable of being one of the top running backs in the country. We are going to run the ball. And so they haven't done that with a ton of efficiency throughout the first, several games here. And so against San Diego State, that was a little bit better, and they were able to kind of get the rhythm, but without Jaden Ott. And so that was, a big deal for them, but they want to run the ball. That's what their goal is. They would love to be able to just, get 200 rushing yards and give Jaden Ott the ball a bunch of times and have him go crazy. And they do have a deep running back group. They can go about 4 deep at any really given point, and there's not a ton of drop off. Once you get beyond Jaden Ott, the rest of that group is pretty close in terms of their talent level. And so any one of those guys is capable of having a big game. And so that's what they would love to do. It hasn't kind of come to fruition just yet. And so maybe this is the game. I know Jaden Ott, after the bye week, it sounds like has gotten a lot healthier, and they feel like he's as close to 100% as he's going to be. And so that could be something you see quite a bit of this week. But with the passing game, it's really been unfortunate for them that they haven't been at full strength, and probably not going to be at full strength, this week as well. They brought in 2 key transfers, Keon Graves from Ohio State, Tobias Merriweather from Notre Dame, as potential impact players. Those guys were projected starters. In training camp, they look like just a different level in terms of their ability compared to the rest of the receiver group at Cal. And then they both get injured late in training camp, and it kind of throws everything for a loop. And they've lost a couple other receivers to injury. So they've been really banged up at the receiver position. So again, you don't really know what they can be. I can tell you what they've been so far, and they've had different guys step up. Corey Dyches is a transfer from Maryland, a tight end, kind of a hybrid, really looks like a wide receiver, but plays tight end for them. He's really been an impact player the last couple of weeks, so he'll be someone to watch out for. But at receiver, they're still really trying to figure out who is going to be our, couple go-to guys at that position. And Isaiah Hunter is a second-year player who is really kind of a surprise. Had an okay spring, but then really turned it on in training camp. And at that time, when everybody was healthy, I was like, I don't know how he's going to fit into this picture, because he's doing well, but there's so many options at receiver. And lo and behold, everyone gets hurt. He's not the top of that depth chart. And he's been really good. And so he's become their go-to receiver, but they're still kind of searching for their identity in a lot of ways, and they haven't been at full strength. And so I think until you really see them in that way, it's hard to say what they're gonna be. What they have been is a little bit inconsistent, and you haven't been able to pinpoint like exactly what they're gonna be. They haven't come out and been like, okay, yeah, they're a passing team now because they have so many running backs injured. They still try to do their thing and get the ground game going, and they've had success at times, had success with the passing game at times, but it's really been inconsistent and kind of uneven. And so I think they're still trying to kind of find their footing. The one consistent has been their quarterback, Fernando Mendoza. who has connections to Miami. This is a
Yeah.
big week for him. And so, yeah, that's really been the one consistent part of the offense so far.
Yeah, awesome segue to my next question here. Fernando, just a great player down here in South Florida. I kind of saw him kind of grow up since a freshman in high school, and really nice to see him thrive over there at Cal. So, kind of wanted to ask about just him this season. Obviously, he got some playing time last year, and they did bring in transfer quarterback. So there was kind of a question if Fernando was going to win the job. Obviously, he did. So if you can just kind of tell me, just based on what you know, why did he end up winning the job, and just your basic, perception of Mendoza and what he can potentially be as a threat offensively to Miami in this game on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really cool story to watch, a cool story to follow. He came into camp last year as a third string guy, and um, I was telling people, I'm like, and fans didn't really want to hear it. They don't want to hear that, the third string guy or the guy that, isn't a new kind of shiny transfer and that they expect to be the savior is being the most consistent guy in camp. But every day in practice, it was like, yeah, he's running with the third unit, but he's been the most consistent. Like the other two guys, Sam Jackson, who's not Auburn, playing receiver, um, Ben Finley, who had come over from North Carolina State, who is now at Akron. Um, those were the guys that everyone expected to kind of take things over. And then Fernando Mendoza every single day was just so consistent. And so uh, I said, if they ever get into a spot where he needs to play, I think he's going to do well. And eventually injuries happen, some inconsistencies at that position. He gets the starting job by the end of the last season. And so comes into the offseason, you go, okay, I think they have things figured out. You expect, okay, this is how it's going to go. And he's going to be their starter. And then they go out, get Chandler Rogers from North Texas, who they recruited previously, lost out on, last offseason. But he took a visit and they liked what he brought to the table. Was formerly at Louisiana Monroe, liked what he brought to the table. So they brought him in as competition for spring ball. And you go, okay, this is going to be a wide open competition. And so obviously a new offensive coordinator, Mike Blesh, had recruited him previously as well. Kind of have that North Texas connection, didn't overlap, but they have some familiarities. And so you thought, okay, maybe this guy has the inside track to the starting job now, and Fernando's going to have to prove himself again. And that's kind of what happened. And so it was an open competition, and they went through training camp, brought in another transfer, CJ Harris from Ohio, for after spring ball. So 4 training camps. So they had kind of a 3-man competition, but it felt like it was going to be either Fernando Mendoza or Chandler Rogers. And you really didn't know. I watched every single practice. Like I mentioned, watched every rep, and I couldn't have told you like, hey, this guy deserves it more than the other guy. And so it was very close. No one really took charge of the job. Fernando kind of had some moments where he wasn't playing his best, and there's a probably about a 3 practice stretch where he looked very out of sorts. And I was like, oh, this might be the chance for Chandler Rogers to kind of take hold of his job. It just didn't happen. And so the coaches were put in a tough position where neither guy really separated himself. They didn't really have any, it was either going to be make a decision or let him play it out. And so the plan was to let him play it out. And then Fernando Mendoza went into, that first game as a starter, as the incumbent guy, kind of felt right. And he won the job. I mean, he looked the part. He did what he needed to do. They win the game. And there was still maybe a little bit of indecision going into the Auburn game. Could they play both guys? They really hadn't settled. Coaching staff never came out and said like, oh yes, he's our starter. That's who we're going with. They kind of left open the possibility of, hey, Chandler Rogers could get some snaps, which he did in that opener. Just didn't materialize. And so he goes out in that Auburn game. He goes 19 for 21 in the first half. And it's like, decision is made. The decision has been made. Fernando Mendoza is your starting quarterback. They win that game. And so since that point, it's really been his show. I don't anticipate them really using a 2 quarterback system unless they really want to get, crazy with it. But at this point, it's going to be his show. He's the starter, barring, some kind of injury. He's going to be the guy the rest of the way. And so he brings a lot of poise. I really have been impressed with his poise. A lot of guys could have got, disappointed, discouraged with so much competition coming in and looking at it like, man, do the coaches even like me? Do they believe in me at all? And so he's never had that. He's always been, hey, I'm going to compete. I'm going to win this job. He'll always give credit to the other guy, but he always feels like, hey, I'm the best quarterback on this roster. And so has a ton of poise, has the arm, has flashed enough of kind of a running element that to keep defenses on their toes a little bit.
Sure.
I think one of the clips he showed, I believe, was one of his runs, or we have it on our Twitter. But if you want to
Yeah.
see his running ability, it's not great. It's not like he's going to be a burner and get after it and break off a 40-yard run, but he has the ability to run, and so kind of a well-rounded player. Again, a ton of poise, has the arm strength, has the accuracy. The one thing is always going to be decision making and knowing when to throw the ball away. The offensive line has been an issue for Cal this season, and so he's been under pressure quite a bit. And so that's, if you want to get to him, you got to put him under pressure, and that's not groundbreaking. A lot of quarterbacks, you get him under pressure, it becomes an issue. And so again, he maybe not as flexible within the pocket in terms of pressure. I think Chandler Rogers has probably a better feel for getting out of danger, but Fernando has an ability to kind of stretch plays and keep them going and get out of trouble a little bit. But if you can get them under pressure, I think that's one way for this Miami defense to really have success, because things get a little bit kind of unpredictable, I guess, at times with them when they get, a little bit under pressure. And so the offensive line, like I mentioned, has had some issues, and so that'll be something to watch. But yeah, he can definitely, use his feet to get in the end zone, and definitely the type of player that is well-rounded, and is again, he just has this moxie, this certain way about him that really stands out. Whether you're talking to him, whether he's on the field, there's just a certain poise, and I think the team really responds to that.
That's all great stuff to hear about Mendoza. I mean, I think maybe people were maybe worried about him, just not getting a chance, and it seems like he played his way onto the field, which is just really nice to hear from a kid that I know personally, and just to kind of see him grow up and just really excel on the field is really, really nice to hear about Mendoza. We'll see how he fares against the Hurricanes. I'm sure he wants to do his best against the hometown squad as well. So that will be an interesting storyline to watch.
Yeah,
Let's
and not to cut you off, but actually off the field too, he's got a burrito. He's got a burrito named after him in Berkeley. So at La Burrita, which is kind of one of the popular spots in Berkeley, he's got a burrito named after him. So that if Miami fans are coming out, get a Mendoza burrito. But yeah, it's been really crazy to see. He's probably the most well-liked guy on the team, probably the most well-liked Cal player right now in terms of just the fan base, and really has ingratiated himself into what it means to be a Cal player, what it means to go to school in Berkeley. And so just wanted to, put that out there, that he definitely on the field definitely gets a lot of respect, but off the field, he's been a really great representative for Cal. And like I said, he got a burrito named after him too.
Awesome. Have you had the burrito?
I have. It's actually pretty good. Maybe not what I would have picked, but it's actually pretty good.
Awesome. I hear that the proceeds of the burrito go to some kind of great cause as well. Is that right?
Yeah, his mother has MS, and so they go to the MS fund, and that's all the proceeds will go to that. And so that was something I know last year he was really wanting to kind of make that happen, wanted to do something for his mother, and who I believe is going to be making the trip out, and that was kind of how it all came together. And so there's a big kind of push from him to like, hey, go get a Mendoza burrito. They've kept it around. They've actually added La Burrita to the food that you can get now at Cal Memorial Stadium. And so, yeah, he's been, I think, everything you want from a starting quarterback, both on and off the field. And just, again, like I said, I don't think Cal could pick probably a better representative for their football program.
Like I said, great to hear, great young man, and seems like a really great asset to this football team going forward. Let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball, and I just really want your thoughts on the defense as far as which playmakers should Miami be concerned with? What kind of defensive scheme do they run as well? And do you think Miami could have success against this defense out in Berkeley?
Yeah, it's an interesting defense. They run a 4-2-5. They've kind of added some different wrinkles to it this year, where they maybe bring a little more pressure. That's kind of been, if you ask a Cal fan, like, what more do you want to see defensively? It's like, bring some pressure, because they've kind of played things straight up for a lot of Justin Wilcox's time there. Peter Sirmon has been his longtime defensive coordinator. They collaborate on a lot of things, a lot of emphasis on the defensive side of the ball in Berkeley. And so I mentioned their secondary. It continues to be a strength of their defense. It kind of always has been under Justin Wilcox. If you look at a lot of where their pro players have come from within the program, if you look at, on Sundays and look at the NFL, a lot of those guys are DBs. And so Another really strong defensive back group. They've gone through some changes. They brought in a lot of transfers over the last couple of years who are now on the field, but a lot of a lot of players that have been within the program are still getting their burn and getting their time to see the field. And so, the biggest name right now, probably their team MVP so far, is Noel Williams, their cornerback, starting cornerback. Has continued to lead the country in interceptions. I haven't looked at the latest numbers, but he's been their catalyst in terms of takeaways. He returned a kickoff in the opener. Has just been their team MVP so far. Making plays, really came up big at Auburn. Probably should have had 3 interceptions in the Auburn game. They got 1 taken away in the end zone. They call it pass interference. I think anybody who watched that play said there was no pass interference on that play. So probably could have 3 interceptions. Ended up sealing the game on an interception. Got them their win there. And so he's been huge. And they have an Idaho transfer, Marcus Harris, on the other side, who's just as good, has interceptions this season, a really good cover guy. So it's really been kind of pick your poison on the outside. And so Noel Williams has kind of been able to have those opportunities that maybe he wouldn't have gotten otherwise if they didn't bring in someone like Marcus Harris, who is a very talented cornerback in his own right. And so it's opened up a lot. The strength of this defense is its linebacker group. Teddy Buchanan, who came over from UC Davis, has been probably better than expected. I mean, he put up a lot of big numbers at UC Davis and FCS school in Northern California. He's a Bay Area guy from San Francisco, but you're unsure of how is that going to translate to, a Power 4 level. And he's been great. I mean, every week he is one of the top tacklers. He's made a ton of plays. He gets into the backfield a lot. Just a really impactful player. And then next to him is their sophomore, Cade Uluave, who, interestingly enough, last training camp was working with the running backs. Kind of a similar to Fernando, kind of was buried on the depth chart, just wanted to get on anywhere he could. They're like, all right, you've played running back in high school, go play some running back. And so he started out training camp as a running back. They had some injury issues midway through the season. They're like, hey, we need you to play running back. Like, you're starting. And so he starts as a freshman, ends up being very, very good, wins Pac-12 Defensive Freshman of the Year after playing about like half the season at middle linebacker. And so now he's back. Those two guys battle it out every week for who's going to be the top tackler. And so there's a lot of talent at that linebacker position. They just got back one of their other transfers, Liam Johnson from Princeton. Looks like he's going to play probably his most, this week at linebacker. Really got back in the game for the first time, against Florida State. And he had a broken leg, missed all of training camp. A highly productive guy from Princeton. And so it'll be interesting to see how he factors in, because behind those two guys, behind Teddy and Cade, there's not a lot of depth. If either one of those guys gets hurt, there's going to be a problem for Cal's defense. And so I think it's positive that they'll get Liam Johnson. This might be the first game I think we actually get to truly see what he looks like on defense. And so that'll be something to look out for. But Craig Woodson is a guy who's been with the program for, I believe, 6 years now, 5 or 6 years, just been around the team. And it has really been a vital part of this defense over the years, often gets overlooked. Again, another position at safety, where they brought in a lot of competition. They brought in guys from LSU, from Oklahoma, to kind of bring competition, potentially unseat some of these guys that have been around in that secondary. And Craig Woodson missed a lot of training camp, but continues to be a very talented defensive back, productive defensive back, kind of cleans up everything in the back end. I was talking to their defensive backs coach last week, and he said, I call him the eraser because he erases kind of all of our mistakes that happen in the middle of the field. And so that'll be someone to look out for. And then Aiden Kiana Aina he's a transfer from a defensive lineman from Notre Dame, has been really productive. They've done a lot in terms of bringing new guys in on the interior of the defensive line, and he's been very, very good for them. And then another name to look out for, outside linebacker, Xavier Carlton, been with the team for a couple of years, came over from Utah as a transfer, but he's been very productive. David Reese, a guy from Florida, an outside linebacker, has been hurt. He's kind of been the heart of their defense and was really the one who brought the team together defensively overall, really, during training camp, and then gets hurt, and he hasn't been at 100%. And so they've been without him. He had a really strong finish last year. And so they needed somebody else to step up, and Xavier Carlton has played better than I think he's ever had at Cal. And he's been a very, very impactful player so far this season at the outside linebacker position, helping out kind of make up for what they lost with David Reese not being able to be out there.
Awesome. Matt Moreno joining me from the Golden Bear Report, part of the Rivals.com network. Lastly, Matt, I ask everyone who I bring on this particular episode is a score prediction for the game. Miami of course, will be favored in this game. They're ranked 8th in the nation, playing an unranked Cal team. Last week, Miami was favored by 17 and a half points, and obviously they did not cover, and they were fortunate to win that game. Miami goes into this game as 10-point favorites on the road. When it's all said and done, at 1:30 Eastern time, let's say, what do you think that
Let's hope.
will read? Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's an interesting game. I mean, I think if this was kind of the similar situation to the Florida State game where I said, man, once Florida State lost to Memphis, I was like, that's not good news for Cal. And it was just kind of that sense that I think a lot of people around the program had, where it's like you'd rather be playing Florida State at 1-2 versus 0-3, and them, having a little passion that
Right.
you're playing Miami coming off a scare. And so I don't think that behooves Cal in terms of, trying to get a win in this game. I think it is something that'll probably work against them. I know there's going to be excitement under Justin Wilcox. Cal has not done well in these types of moments. And that's kind of what happened with the Florida State situation. What happened with Auburn last year was kind of a similar game to what happened, against Auburn this year, where kind of a rock fight, a lot of defensive struggle, not a lot of offense. And so Cal has not done well in these situations. I still need to see more from this Cal team. Again, offensively, it hasn't been good. There's something missing there. Maybe it clicks this week. I'm not sold on that yet. I need to kind of see it before I say, yeah, they're gonna, win a big game like this. I just think that there's probably a little bit too much still working against Cal. I don't think they're the team that we necessarily fully saw. I know just looking at the records, before that Florida State game, you're like, oh, they're on a roll. It wasn't great. It wasn't like it was perfect play. And so still not quite sold. It all kind of stems from the offense. I think defensively, they'll do a good enough job to keep Miami in check. I still have my concerns about the offense and if they're able to really put up enough points. And so I think Miami's going to win this game. I think it's probably not going to be as close as last week. I just all the elements, kind of knowing Cal, watching Cal, time I've covered in the last couple of years, just doesn't seem like a recipe for a Cal win. I could be wrong, but I'm thinking something like 34-21. I think the offense for Cal is going to be a struggle. And I think, there's enough with Cam Ward. I know there's a lot of confidence there because they've gone up against Cam Ward before. I've had pretty good success against Cam Ward. So maybe that comes into play more than I'm giving them credit for. But, I'd feel a lot better about this if I'm Cal, if Miami had lost last week and maybe didn't get that scared to kind of jumpstart them and be like, hey, no, we need to be aware of these teams that we're playing. And so I think I'm going to go 34-21. Maybe it ends up being closer than that, but I'm still not sold on this Cal offense just yet.
Yeah, I was going to base my answer to this question based on what I heard from you during this podcast. And basically from what I heard, I feel like the fact that they're down receivers, I think is really key. I think they would need some big time receivers to move the chains against this defense that is feeling like last week was a loss. They're kind of feeling that way from what you hear from the guys from the press conferences. So I think they're really motivated to really tackle better. They had over 20 missed tackles in that game against Virginia Tech. So I think there's going to be extreme focus on that. I think Cal will be able to move the ball a little bit, though, with if you say Ott is healthy, then I think they should be able to move the ball with that zone read scheme with Mendoza. I think, they may overcommit to Ott sometimes and vice versa. And I think that's going to break some big runs for Cal. But you also said that they had trouble in the red zone, and Miami's been pretty decent in that respect defensively. So I think they should be able to limit Cal to a lot of field goals, kind of like what they did to South Florida 2 weeks prior. So I expect the offense to kind of get going for Miami as well. I think it'll be close in this first half, though. I think just the juice from Gameday and hopefully a large crowd. I think that will kind of keep it close for that first half. But I think after the first half, I think when Miami pulls away, if you're asking me, I think this is maybe a 30-13 type of game when it's all said and done on Saturday night. But, that's why we play the games, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Matt Moreno, once again, joining me from the Cal Bear Report with Rivals.com. Thank you for joining me on a Wednesday. I really appreciate the time. Great stuff from you. Hopefully, we will link up again because you do some work for other sites here at Rivals as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll kind of find another way to kind of link back up.
Absolutely. That's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to the website. Also, subscribe to this podcast on all platforms, as well as this YouTube channel live from Canes County.